Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships.
And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. However, we see that it's more than just ships, because Egypt is the house of bondage. In verse 45 and 46 it says, moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee, and they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. In the New Testament, we see in the book of James, chapter 1, verse 1, James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. Why did they get scattered? Because they fell under the curses. They didn't obey the Most High God. So they got scattered. And history tells us they left out of Egypt, out of slavery on foot. But they kept going in and out of slavery. And by how? Ships. So we see the book of James in the New Testament. The date of the writing of James is from 45 to 49 AD. That's years before 70 AD, when the Roman general Titus sacked Jerusalem. We see that was before that time. But it was after the Babylonian captivity, or the captivity of Judah, or the Babylonian exile, where they went in slavery on foot. Leviticus 26:33 says, and I will scatter you among the heathen. What are heathens? Non-believers in the Most High God. They serve other gods, which are really pagan gods, which are really no gods. Now, in the New Testament again, Acts chapter 2, beginning with verse 1, it says, and when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. It's talking about Israelites. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as a fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were filled with the Holy Ghost, and began to speak with other tongues, as the Spirit gave them utterance. And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation. Out of just a few nations? No, out of every nation. Why? Because as in James, it says they were scattered. This is also in Acts chapter 2. Let me skip down to verse. Let me see. Verse 9. Parthians and Medes. Now these are devout Jews out of every nation. Parthians and Medes, Elamites, and the dwellers in Mesopotamia, and in Judea, and in Cappadocia, in Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, in Egypt, and in the parts of Libya about Cyrene, and strangers of Rome, Jews and proselytes, Cretes and Arabians. Why is that? These were Jews that were living or even born in these other countries. So that's why it says, an example is strangers of Rome. They were born in Rome. Like, for example, Paul said he's a man of Tarsus, but he's a Jew. He was an Israelite, just born in another country. Leviticus 26:33 says, and I will scatter you among the heathen. So, for the Israelites' disobedience, the Lord said he was going to scatter them. And not just scatter them any old where, but among the heathen. Once again. So those are people that serve all kinds of pagan idols, worship, and whatnot. And we still see evidence of this today. So much so that even Israelites today are doing the same things that the heathens are doing. Isn't that something? Now, here's an example. This is the last 2 million years, page 77. Worship of the sun god. For the next 500 years, Persia came under the rule of the Parthians, a warlike people from the northeast. This was a period of almost ceaseless conflict with Rome, from which neither side emerged victor. Roman soldiers carried back to Europe the Persian worship of Mithras, the sun god. If Mithraism had not been superseded in the Roman Empire by Christianity, Europe might have adopted the Persian religion. But you can read also in this book of the last 2 million years that the Romans mingled in paganism with their Christianity. And what did they bring back to Europe? Mithras, the worship of the sun god. That's why when in a lot of art and as you see on the screen, a actual carving of Mithra. And when you see paintings and whatnot of people, or they have the sun behind their head. Rome adopted that as well. Also in the last 2 million years, it says, this is page 286, says Persian Zoroastrian religion and the god Mithras. And we know Mithras is the sun god, right? Let's see. I got the book right in front of me because I want to show you something about this. It says Persian Zoroastrian religion and the god Mithras, right? It says a Persian relief shows a 4th century king center with Ahura Mazda, chief god of the Zoroastrian religion, and the god Mithras. There are even famous people today that is in this religion, Zoroastrianism. Here's a famous person that is a Zoroastrian. Okay, Erykah Badu. And why Badu? Because it originates back to Egypt, the Ba and the Ka. And you see her ring, on her ring finger, she has an Egyptian ankh. Jeremiah 2:36. Why gottest thou about so much to change thy way? Thou also shalt be ashamed of Egypt, as thou wast ashamed of Assyria. Whoa. Why would the Israelites be ashamed of Egypt and Assyria? Because in Egypt, the first 30 years they was there with Joseph, everything was cool until another Pharaoh rose up who didn't know Joseph. And for 400 years they were in bondage, in slavery in Egypt. The picture where the ancient carving in Egypt, where it shows the men on the top and the men on the bottom, the ones on the top are Egyptians. They have Egyptian headdresses. The ones on the bottom have their arms tied behind their back, which means what? Bondage. The ones on the bottom, Israelites. Here's an ancient carving from Assyria, where the Hebrews went into slavery, bondage. And it says, what? Jeremiah 2 says, thou will be ashamed of Egypt and Assyria. In the same chapter, Jeremiah, verse 14, it says, is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Now the Lord is putting a question on the table by the mouth of the prophet Jeremiah. Is Israel a servant? Why would he even ask that question? Because Israel has been in and out of captivity, bondage, and slavery throughout the ages. Started in Egypt. And you can even read the book of Judges. I believe it's Judges chapter 2 or 3, and so on and so on, where they were in and out of captivity. Read about Chushan-Rishathaim, where they served him 8 years. Chushan-Rishathaim means twice evil king, king of Mesopotamia. Read it to you about Mesopotamia in the book of Acts. But it says, is Israel a homeborn slave? Is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Why is he spoiled? And he does not mean spoiled like I'm going to give you everything you want. He means spoiled as in the spoils of war, which means take. When a nation of people conquer another nation of people, what do? They spoil them. They take their riches, they take their kingdom, they take their goods, they take their people. They take their substance, they take everything. The spoils of war. So, modern man knows automatically that the Israelites went into slavery with Egypt and Babylon and the Assyrians. Okay. But Israel been in and out of slavery.
From about 1525 to 1866, 12.5 million Africans were taken from their homeland and forcibly transported across the Atlantic, a journey that approximately 2 million of them would not survive. By the turn of the 18th century, European merchants were building vessels capable of transporting hundreds of enslaved people per journey. These ships had extra portholes for ventilation, weapons mounted on deck in case of rebellion, and additional compartments added below deck to take on more human cargo. Before boarding the ships at African port cities, enslaved people were stripped of their clothing and remaining possessions and had their heads forcibly shaved.
Now, the last part of that clip, they showed that they shaved the slaves' heads. Why would they do that? To not only show ownership of those slaves, but also to change their appearance. And when you look at many slave pictures of slaves, they got their heads shaved. or they have very, very short hair. You rarely see the Israelites, mainly, with their beautiful hair. And I'm going to show you some pictures of some Israelites. Here's ancient carving of Israelites. Now you see that hairstyle? Those are cornrows. Cornrows and nappy beards. And here's another picture, even in color. And it shows the Israelites' locks. And look at the texture of the locks and the beard. That's why in Songs of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 5, it says, I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar. That's black. As the curtains of Solomon. Okay? Here's another ancient carving of an Israelite. Locks and cornrows and nappy beards. Locks and cornrows and nappy beards. The ancient black Hebrews, Jacob and his family. That's the cover of this book. Jacob had woolly hair and a nappy beard, and he was black. Songs of Solomon chapter 5 verse 11 says his locks are bushy and black as a raven. Now look at the ancient carving of an Israelite and look at a black man's picture today. Same thing. Same thing. Deuteronomy 28 and 48 says, and he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck when you go into this captivity, when you go into this bondage, when you go into this slavery. I haven't seen evidence of this being in Egypt, but it did happen in the transatlantic slave trade. A yoke of iron upon your neck, Israel. And they made many different kinds of yokes of iron. Even got ones with bells on them so they could hear if you tried to run away. All kinds of yokes of iron upon the one that didn't obey the Most High God and got all these curses brought upon them. Even had yokes of iron around the slaves' necks with long pikes, long spikes, so they couldn't get through the woods and get away. They get caught on something. Here's another one with bells, like a sounding alarm, if you will. And I read it to you earlier in Deuteronomy 28, verse 45 and 46, say, and they shall be upon thee for a sign and a wonder. So nobody else can claim this but black folks, right? Nobody else. The sign fits Israel like a glove. Like a glove. Nobody else can claim this but black folks. Plain and simple. Deuteronomy 28 and 64 says, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all people. Whoa. All people? From the one end of the earth even unto the other. That's the whole world that Israel has been scattered among all people. Go to a far away country where there are a lot of Europeans, and you will see black families living there for generations, because the Lord said he was going to scatter them unto all people. Now, before the ships came, there was only captivity in surrounding areas of landmass such as Assyria, Babylon, Mesopotamia, etc. But when the ships came, Israel got scattered all over the world. The whole world. And I'm gonna show you that. Here's a map. Here's a map showing the slave trade. Well, before the slave trade, it said captivity of Israel and Judah. Okay, you see. Lydia, Phrygia, Assyria, Moab, Edom, Arabia, Egypt, Elam, Persia, Media. All these places, Babylonia, all these places you can walk to on foot. The slave masters probably were riding on horses, but the actual slaves, which was Israel and Judah, were walking on foot. Wasn't no cars, wasn't no buses, wasn't no trains. They had to walk there. Okay. That's why he said but see, in Acts chapter 2 it says Parthians and Medes in Egypt. Okay. Rome, well, the Romans had warships. So we talking before 70 AD when Israel got scattered out of Jerusalem completely. You think they didn't have no slaves? You think mighty powerful Roman Empire didn't have black slaves? That's why it says in Acts chapter 2, strangers of Rome. Because they weren't born there. They were born there, but they didn't originate there. They were taken there in captivity. And where? Not just among the heathen, but all over the world. That's where the ships come in. He gonna scatter Israel among all people. The whole wide world. And can't nobody else claim that. He didn't say he was going to put you on no trains and go to this other country for 4 or 5 years in a Holocaust. No, he said you was going to be in ships and taken into slavery all over the world. And when you read more of the curses of Deuteronomy, it does not fit anybody else but black people. Matter of fact, I mentioned verse in Deuteronomy 28. I mentioned verse 45 and 46. When you read verse 43, it says, "The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low." Verse 44 says, "He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him." Who owns the money lending system? Who owns the banking system? Not Israelites, because Israelites are under the curses. He said he gonna lend to you and you not gonna lend to the, and he shall be the head and thou shalt be the tail. Who that's talking about? Now, here's another map of the slave trade, because a lot of people like to say, you know, the slave triangle or the triangular trade, which means between Africa, South America, and North America. But the slave trade went beyond that, because the Lord, when he says he gonna do something, he best believe you can bank on him doing it. This right here, this map shows that they went into slavery in Asia as well. What? You think Chinese and Japanese people didn't have black slaves? Think again. The Lord said he was going to scatter them among all people, and that's what he did. He keeps his promises, good or bad. That's the thing. You cannot play with this God. The Most High God is the true and living God, the only God we need to be serving. So in Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26, there's blessings and curses. And if you don't do what you're supposed to be doing, serving the Most High God, do you think you're going to get the blessings? No, the curse is going to fall upon you. And even if you move to the suburbs, the curse is going to follow you, because they apply to you and you only. You and your people. Here's an ancient document. I believe it's written in Mandarin or Chinese writing. I had to look this up because I had this document years ago. But this is documenting black slaves in China. Black slaves in China. And then you wonder why, or in Asia, I can't remember which one. But you wonder why Asians act the way they do towards us. And it's not just the Chinese, not just the Japanese. It's Taiwanese and Koreans and other Asian people that had black people in slavery. This is documented history. So you got all these Bible scholars out here claiming that they know certain things. And if they know these things, why aren't they telling us? Why aren't they telling people? Why aren't they delivering the information to the masses so everybody can know and have a proper understanding of why certain things are certain ways, and maybe society will be a better place? Because maybe somebody will feel guilty for having this nation of people in slavery, because they sure wouldn't want nobody doing them like that, right? They don't want to be a slave, right? And it kills me when you hear Gentiles talking about, I ain't never had no slave. Yeah, you may not have, but your forefathers had, and you reaping the benefits of it, even because of the color of your skin. Even because you not black, you still reaping the benefits of it. because we still fighting for civil human rights today. You're not fighting for civil rights. You're not fighting for human rights. Many of your kind are the oppressors. Many of your kind are doing wicked things to my people, to black folks. So you may not have had slaves, but you ain't doing nothing against slavery. So that makes you just as bad. Here's paintings of Kunlun slaves. It says Kunlun/African slave, but we know who they are. In the Tang Dynasty in China, 618 to 907 AD. This is after the Roman general sacked Jerusalem in 70 AD. Hundreds of years. And they had slavery, and they had black folks enslaved hundreds of years. You know, the last few countries to give up slavery were Arab and Asia. But here's proof right here. You can find this proof anywhere. You can find it on the internet just as well as finding it out of a history book. But they don't teach us history in schools, do they? Because they want to hide the truth. This proves what the Lord said, that he's going to scatter Israel among the heathen, because heathen are non-believers. Don't we see a lot of Asian countries not believing in God? They call them atheists, right? Or they may be serving pagan gods, right? Because the servant of the Most High God is going to speak and tell the truth, right? You got all these heathens not saying a word about the truth and not having no compassion. Here's another picture of some slaves in an Asian country. These are also Kunlun slaves. This is recorded history, y'all. This is recorded history. And when the recorded history that is never talked about is brought out into the open, people seem to be shocked. Even Israelites are shocked themselves. Even black folks are shocked themselves because nobody has told them this. Nobody has showed them this. It's a mystery. It is hidden from people. It is hidden. It is a mystery. And thank the Most High God for allowing us to have access to technology and the internet, because we can find things and research things even more so. That's why you can't lie to these children. These children can Google anything. They can find anything that you're talking about. Just get on their phone. But most people don't read. So now that we have technology, you can find all the truth you need to find. That's why it's not good to lie. But you got a lot of nations lying. Well, they ain't saying that, they not bringing out the truth, so they might as well be lying, right? Deuteronomy 32 verse 26 says, I said, I will scatter them into corners. I will make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. Because most pictures you see, when you see a caption, they label us Africans. But I showed you in part 1, Africans were apologizing to us for selling us to the Gentiles in the transatlantic slave trade. Africans are descendants of Ham. And I showed you also in part 1 that Ham is the father of the dark races, but not the Negroes. Okay? He said he would scatter them into corners and make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. So that means what? Not only do the Israelites not know who they are, but many others don't know who they are as well. The Lord said it, and he did it. The Lord said he was going to do it, and it's done. And it ain't going to change until the Lord returns. He said he's going to make the remembrance of them cease from among men. Why is it that whenever so-called Black History Month comes around, the only thing for black folks that other people show is roots and the slave ships? You can't go back no further than that though, right? That's all our history amounts to, is slave ships. That's a sign and a wonder. That is truly a sign and a wonder that nobody knows who you are. But people know, and I'm going to point that out a little bit later. Now, he said, into Egypt again with ships. I showed you before that Egypt means bondage. It's in the Bible 10 times. The house of bondage, the house of bondage, the house of bondage. And it's talking about Egypt. And it don't mean all the time literal Egypt or physical Egypt. It also means spiritual. The house of bondage. So when the Lord said in Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, he's telling his people, you disobey me, you do not want the blessings, you want the curses. And the last curse in the book of Deuteronomy 28 is going into Egypt, which is the house of bondage, which means slavery and captivity, by ships. And it's a proven fact that nobody else can claim that. And he said you're going to be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you, meaning nobody's going to save you out this, because the Lord said it's going to happen. And it's going to happen until he says stop. Once again, Deuteronomy 32 and 26 says, I will scatter them into corners. I will make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. Why black folks don't know who they are? Why black folks always want to claim this and claim that, but not who they really were created to be? Why is that? Because black folks been scattered for so long that they forgot where they came from. Ain't that a shame? For so long, thousands of years, scattered like the Lord said he was going to scatter, and forgot who they are, forgot their identity. Scratching their head. We'll debate with somebody bringing the truth to them of who they really are. We'll debate and argue and fuss and fight to claim something else. That's why you got to ask your pastors. Are we Gentiles, Pastor? No. I thought Gentiles were white people or Europeans. But a black man can't be Gentile. Here's The Valley of the Dry Bones by Rudolph Windsor, pages 74 and 75. It says, the curse of the loss of identity. It says, the word identity refers to a people's nationality, culture, history, and language. A people gets its nationality and language from the nation to which they belong. Germans are from Germany, Chinese from China, Egyptians from Egypt, Mexicans from Mexico, and black Americans from where? Of all the nationalities in America, black Americans are the only ethnic group that is not called by its true national name. This is quite interesting. We see here that the black Americans lack a nationality. Why? The reason is the Lord God of heaven and earth has permitted the enemies of the African Judean to take away our true nationality. Do we have biblical proof of this? Yes, we do. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. Psalm 83, verse 4. Whoa! That's a bombshell. Here it is. He said that God's enemies, God allowed the enemies of the African Judean to take away our true nationality. What's the major three religions? Christians, Muslims, and Judaism, right? All spin-offs of one true knowledge of God, right? But when somebody say Jew, that's a slang term for coming out of the tribe of Judah. Anyway, that's another lesson. Let's read Psalm 83. Psalm 83. Keep not thou silence, O God, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent, they are confederate against thee, the tabernacles of Edom, and the Ishmaelites of Moab, and the Hagarenes, Gebal and Ammon and Amalek, the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre. Assur also is joined with them. They have helped the children of Lot, Selah. Oh, that's powerful. You know, when I first read Psalm 83, I said, oh my God, these people know who we are, and they ain't been telling nobody all these years. They've been hiding this from the public, as well as hiding it from us as well, because they are the powers that be. They are the ones in control. Now, verse 4 says, they have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation. That's cold. From being a nation? And what else to say? That the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. Didn't the Lord say that in Deuteronomy 32, verse 26? I said I would scatter them into corners. I would make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. God is in control. So, for disobedience to him, God allows other people to punish the Israelites. Don't that make sense? Because back in the old days, he would strike you down with lightning, or make the ground swallow you up, or perform some miraculous thing. But he, We are created in his image. And the Lord tell you in the book of Jeremiah, he is weary with repenting. Which means what? Stop messing up and just do right from the jump street. Quit calling on me and saying you sorry. No, get it right. Obey my voice. That's all you gotta do. And how do you obey God's voice? You keep his commandments. And that shows that you love him. But the Israelites didn't do that. They didn't love the Lord. They didn't love the Most High God. Israel was into everything. Good, evil, everything. And thought they could get away with it. And got puffed up. The Lord gave them their own land. Gave them riches when they came out of Egyptian slavery. Gave them everything they ever wanted and needed. And they still turned their backs to him. And now we see the results of that. To this day. Yes, the Lord is merciful and gracious. But like it says in the book of Jeremiah, I am weary with their repenting. Just straighten up and fly right. Man, that's deep though. Because Psalm 83 shows anybody that has some knowledge, wisdom, and understanding reading the Bible, that you got all these different nations. And what did it say? What did it say in verse 3? It says they have taken crafty counsel against thy people, against God's people, and consulted against his hidden ones. The ones hidden are the ones that don't know who they are. And verse 4 says that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance of who Israel, true Israel, really is to this day. Man. Now, if you read this, if you read the Bible with a carnal mind, you're not going to get full understanding. Because if you read the Bible with a carnal mind, you reading Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26, the blessings and the curses, and don't see that the curses fits one particular nation of people out of this whole planet that's being televised all the time of things happening to them that fits the curses, you're not gonna understand that. But on the other hand, to make matters worse, you got people that's supposed to be Bible scholars, went to theology school, went to seminary school, and supposed to know what the Word of God says. And if they do know, they not telling nobody the truth about the things, about the matters. Romans chapter 1 verse 18 says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. Read it to you in Psalm 83, all these different nations that know that's keeping true Israel hidden. They know who true Israel is, but they ain't gonna tell you. They ain't gonna tell the world. So they withholding the truth. And it says right here, hold the truth in unrighteousness. So that means they wicked. Right? They are wicked. Won't reveal to the people who's lost who they really are, who their identity is. Here's Daniel 9. Now Daniel was in captivity under Babylon, and then the oppressors changed hands to the Medes and Persians. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years. Whoa, that means what? Daniel was reading, right? Who was he reading? Well, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. Whoa! The prophet Daniel was reading Jeremiah's books. Jeremiah the prophet. Okay? This is what a lot of people need to be doing. Maybe the Lord will open their eyes. Verse 3. And I set my face unto the Lord God to seek by prayer and supplication with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. And I prayed unto the Lord my God and made my confession and said, O Lord, the great and dreadful God. Ooh, he ain't sweet Jesus, y'all. He said, the great and dreadful God, keeping the covenant and mercy to them that love him and to them that keep his commandments. Ooh, who loves God? Those that keep his commandments. We have sinned, and have committed iniquity, and have done wickedly, and have rebelled even by departing from thy precepts and from thy judgments. What are precepts? Scripture. Hence, commandments. Okay? Verse 6. Neither have we hearkened unto thy servants the prophets, which spake in thy name to our kings, our princes, and our fathers, and to all the people of the land. O Lord, righteousness belongeth unto thee, but unto us confusion of faces. Oh! Who's the main people on this planet today that don't know who they are? True Israel. The Israelites, the lost tribes of Israel, who were scattered among the people of the world for thousands of years. He said, confusion of faces, as at this day, to the men of Judah and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and unto all Israel, that are near and that are far off. That's right, scattered. Through all the countries whither thou hast driven them, because of their trespass that they have trespassed against thee. O Lord, to us belongeth confusion of faces. That's verse 8. I jumped the gun. Daniel the prophet understood the books of Jeremiah the prophet, that the Lord was going to accomplish 70 years in desolations of Jerusalem. But you have to read with understanding to know that there was also 70 prophetic years. That's why the prophet Daniel was in captivity for so long. Because he looked around, he like, man, we shouldn't be under nobody else right now. We shouldn't be serving no other nation right now. The captivity should be over. But it was 70 prophetic years as well. But he understood that. It took him a while. He had to pray again and get some understanding from the angel Gabriel. But he understood that Daniel understood that Israel has sinned against God and God is punishing them as at this day. And what did he say? Verse 5 says, we have sinned and have committed iniquity. What is iniquity? Sin. And have done wickedly and hast rebelled, even by departing from thy precepts and from thy judgments. So if you depart from the precepts and the judgment, that means you ain't keeping no commandments. And that also means you don't love the Lord. But look at this, Daniel 9 and 8, he gonna say it again. O Lord, to us belongeth confusion of face, to our kings, to our princes, and to our fathers, because we have sinned against thee. So the reason you don't know who you are is because you sinned against God. Remember that old song with Digital Underground? Do what you like. Yeah, that's what Israel did. They did what they like instead of what God told them to do. Do what you want to do. We don't serve a Burger King God. He said, do this and I'm going to bless you. But if you don't and you do something else, I'm going to curse you. And in this very same chapter, Daniel confesses that Israel is under the curses. Now, Psalm 83 again, talking about the Ishmaelites. Top two on the list. Edom and Ishmael. Right? This is a page from Slavery in the Arab World, which we know are Ishmaelites. Ishmaelites are Arabs. Slavery in the Arab World, and this picture is from the history of slavery. Slavery in the Arab World, page 61. It says, during the period of the Arab Caliphate, hundreds of years earlier, slave women, particularly the more talented and attractive, were often instructed in the arts, poetry, and music. There were exceptions to this standard of treatment where black slaves, usually men, came off badly. What else is new? At the hands of their masters. Usually such slaves were shunted off to perform the meanest work. During the reign of the Moroccan Sultan Moulay Archie in the 18th century, black slaves suffered greatly. And the Arabs were the last ones to give up slavery. And then you have brothers and sisters wanting to be Muslim. But that was one of your first slave masters. In Genesis 37:28, Joseph was sold by his own brothers to the Arabs in slavery in Egypt. Ain't that something? By his own brothers. And instead of serving the true and living God, people want to go to a quote-unquote brotherhood, which originated from a spinoff of the true religion, worshiping a moon god and kissing a rock in Mecca. That's idolatry. That's pagan. How is that a brotherhood? It ain't a brotherhood of the Most High God. That's what Ishmael and Muhammad and them gave you. That's another lesson. Jeremiah 29, verse 14 says, and I will be found of you, saith the Lord, and I will turn away your captivity. Oh, there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I will gather you from all the nations and from all the places whither I have driven you, saith the Lord. He gonna turn away our captivity. Jeremiah 31:10. He that scattered Israel will gather him. So there's still hope. In future days, the Most High God, the true and living God, he's going to gather his people once again, like he did out of Egypt. Let's see the same thing in the New Testament. Matthew 24. Matthew 24, verses 29 through 31. Verse 29. immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. We ain't had the tribulation yet, so it's on the way. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Verse 31. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. The Lord gonna gather his people from all over the planet, if they be so blessed. He gonna gather. That's why I read it to you. He that scattered Israel will gather him. Let's see you read it in the Old Testament one more time. Isaiah chapter 11. Verse 11. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time, not the third time, not the fourth time, the second time, to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria. Oh, Israel was in slavery in Assyria, and from Egypt, and Israel was in slavery in Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. That's all over this planet. That's the Lord gonna gather his people from the whole wide world. That's why it's so important. So important for Israel to start keeping the commandments. To start keeping the commandments, doing right by God. So when he gathers you, he won't put you in the lake of fire. You will be reigning in his kingdom. And yes, other nations will serve you. But you ain't gonna be wicked like they was and have us in slavery. Because you're gonna be ruling and reigning with the Most High God, the true and living God, the God of Israel, the King of Israel, the Lord of the Sabbath. You're gonna be reigning with him and judging the nations of the earth and judging angels. That's going to take a long time. So you're going to have to get your spiritual perfect body to do that. But if you don't, you're going to get your spiritual perfect body to be in damnation and hell. Peace and blessings multiply.